The US and UK strikes against Houthi targets 2 days ago was a significant display of military power that's kind of being glossed over. We're going to talk about that. Germany intervenes in the genocide case being brought against Israel, and while most Americans support a ceasefire in Gaza, they still want Hamas out. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 9:30 a.m. Central on Sunday, January 14th, 2024. So following the US and UK strikes against Houthi targets 2 days ago in Yemen, we really haven't seen any sort of noticeable reaction by either the Houthis or Iran. Overnight, there were two more claimed attacks by the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, a loose grouping of Iranian-backed militias that say they attacked U.S. bases in the region with rockets and or missiles, but nothing really out of the ordinary. So we're kind of waiting at this point to see, is something coming, a major attack coming, or did those strikes do the trick? Now, getting into some personal opinions here, so bear with me. That's kind of the nature of where this whole thing sits right now. I don't think that one wave of attacks eliminated the Houthi ability to wage war in the Red Sea or elsewhere. That's just not realistic. So it's likely that they still have a sizable arsenal on hand, able to carry out military operations wherever they see fit. So given that they did attack that ship carrying Russian oil on the 12th, mistakenly, supposedly, and their statements about how they're more resolved than ever to continue their support of the Palestinian people by targeting commercial vessels headed to Israeli ports in the Red Sea, I'm kind of expecting the attacks to continue. And I don't think that's really going out on a limb. From most that I've read and listened to, the general sentiment is that this isn't over. This wave of strikes by the US and UK maybe let the Houthis know that we're serious, but I don't think it was enough for them to fully stop what they believe is the right move for them to be taking. Now, something that's going to get glossed over here, but I think it's worth spending a few minutes on, is just how impressive that military effort was a few nights ago. Now, again, you can argue that we shouldn't be there at all, or we shouldn't have taken this action, or it was a bridge too far, or whatever, any of those things. But in terms of execution, just plain out military execution, it was spot on. Houthi targets all across Yemen were hit by missiles fired from surface ships and submarines while dealing with airstrikes coming from fighters launched off of carriers and land, both by the United States and United Kingdom. So a joint multinational strike that resulted in no friendly equipment damaged, no reported civilian casualties, and from what we can tell so far, positive effects on target. There aren't a lot of countries that can pull that sort of military operation off 7,000 miles away from home. It's just, the Afghanistan withdrawal is fresh in a lot of our minds, and we're constantly wondering how we would manage or measure up in a conflict like what we're seeing in Ukraine, Russia. So I think this, albeit relatively small, all things considered, is a bit of a reminder that we still possess the greatest ability to employ combat power anywhere around the world that has ever been seen in history. I mean, it's worth noting that the Houthis do have a substantial air defense capability. This was not a defenseless target. They have, throughout the course of their civil war, shot down a handful of F-16s and AH-64s, and they're believed to have in their possession, as of today, a variety of SA-2s, SA-3s, SA-6s, SA-9s, and probably have picked up a handful of more modern, advanced surface-to-air capabilities from Iran. So that US and UK raid went right through that coverage with no losses. Now, it wasn't all perfection, of course. Unfortunately, during the course of operations, a U.S. sailor did fall off the side of a boat off the coast of Somalia that was experiencing 8-foot swells. Sounds like another sailor jumped in to try to rescue him, but as of this report, both are missing and the search is underway. Overnight, Germany made news by not only rejecting South Africa's claim at the International Court of Justice that Israel's committing genocide in Gaza, but now they're set to intervene directly on Israel's behalf. So a German spokesperson said, quote, "In the view of Germany's history and the crime against humanity of the Shoah," which I understand is another term for the Holocaust, that's what they're talking about here, "the federal government sees itself as particularly committed to the Convention Against Genocide. This convention is a central instrument of international law to implement, quote, never again," end quote. Germany went on to condemn the genocide claim as political instrumentation, saying the accusation has no basis in fact. What it sounds like they're set to argue is that what's happening in Gaza shouldn't even be considered a genocide. Therefore, it shouldn't be in front of this court at all. So the court can stop listening to arguments. They already have, I guess, but they don't need to move forward in any capacity. I'm not sure. Don't take that as fact. I'm not a lawyer, and I have a feeling that this is about to get pretty messy in a lot of ways. So if anyone has any solid resources for following international law in cases like this, please share them in the comments below. I've found Lawfare blog to be helpful in the past around some U.S. constitutional questions as it relates to U.S. military forces and the application of force overseas, things like that. So I'll probably keep an eye out there on the Lawfare blog for a little bit, but open to any suggestions on that front. It's just really not my area of expertise. So Hamas put out a video yesterday of what they say is combat footage, combat engagements with Israeli forces in the Khan Yunis area, southern portion of the Gaza Strip. It's all like this, very close range engagements with Israeli armor and infantry. As I have throughout all videos, I'm cutting off at the point of impact for a couple of reasons. One, I don't like to show where an individual's life may have ended, regardless of what side it's on. The other is that in a lot of cases, these platforms don't like that piece. When the weapon is fired or when the weapon detonates, in every one of these videos, the round does impact, from what I can tell, against the Israeli vehicle. So for some of the urban combat, you can understand how Hamas can hide. Historically, it's been very hard to root out defending forces from an urban environment, especially when it's entirely destroyed like Gaza is. But some of these where they pop out, 5 meters from an Israeli tank from behind like a dirt pile, that's hard to explain. You would expect more coverage there, more of a screen, be it overhead or infantry on the ground to prevent that from happening. But again, I'm not the one on the ground. Combat is incredibly complex, and we're only getting one little point of view. But needless to say, Hamas continues to put out footage showing the intensity of the fighting across the Gaza Strip. Now, a common point that I've heard over the last few months is that the majority of Americans support a ceasefire in Gaza, which I think is true, but it might be a little more complicated as we dig into some additional numbers. So here's a Data for Progress poll that I came across showing 61% in favor of ceasefire, which generally tracks. Like if you look this question up, any number of polls, I think everything I've seen, it's over 50%. So to say that the majority of Americans support a ceasefire, I think is in line with all of the data that's been presented, which is good. The way I take that is Americans are being asked, do you want war or do you want peace? And they're choosing peace. They're choosing the option that means fewer people dying. But there have also been some polls that take it a little bit further that might complicate that answer just a little bit. So there's a poll here from mid-December that was released last week by YouGov. It asked a related question with somewhat different results. So 21% of respondents said they would prefer a permanent ceasefire that ends the fighting but leaves Hamas in control of Gaza, whereas 40% said they prefer a continuation of fighting until Hamas is no longer in control. And there's also 39% that wasn't sure, it's a pretty big number. For 40% of respondents, 39% of respondents did not have an answer, definitely skews that data. But you do have twice as many respondents there saying they want the fighting to continue until Hamas is no longer in control. I think that's notable just because it, in a sense, kind of contrasts with the idea of calling for a ceasefire now. So I thought that was worth bringing up. Then in that same YouGov poll, they asked, what is the most appropriate action for Israel to take? 33% said to de-escalate military action against Hamas to avoid harming Palestinian civilians. 37% said to take further military action against Hamas to protect Israeli citizens. And then 29% said not sure. So, hey, we're down on the not sure part, at least, right? From 39 to 29%. But again, even if it is 33 to 37, which is relatively close, then maybe the takeaway here is that it's relatively split on the group of people that say stop everything to avoid harming civilians or take further action. Hamas still has yet to be eliminated in Gaza. So, personal opinion here, but I think that when folks throw out that the majority of Americans want a ceasefire in Gaza, what they're suggesting is that the public sentiment is not on Israel's side. And I'm not sure that's accurate right now. I mean, I do think there's been a big shift. 20 years ago, I think the pro-Israeli stance in the United States would have been much more prominent than it is today, but it hasn't completely gone away. So my takeaway here is that feelings on the conflict are still pretty mixed here in the United States, and I don't think I could say with any confidence that one side or the other has a clear advantage when it comes to support from the American public. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out the sit reps I put out on Substack. Link is in the description below. Substack now also has ad-free, sponsor-free videos that go live about 1 hour before they're up on YouTube. But thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.